Hey everybody, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Jack Simpson podcast. On today's episode, we've got on Orion Miller. Welcome.
Hey Jack, how you doing?
Yeah, not too bad. Yourself?
Yeah, very well. Thanks for having me.
No, not a problem. I came across you on Instagram, as I do the majority of my guests, or all of my guests really, because you do a very strange sport that up until I saw on Instagram, I didn't know even existed.
Yeah, I mean, there aren't many of us out there in the ice surfing community, so I'm not surprised you hadn't seen it before.
Yeah, well, I've just always seen it as being a, summer sport with, the dreads and stuff, but on the beach, not on the ice caps and stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, the one that I saw was, I think it went quite viral.
Was it on TikTok or it was on Insta, you said?
Instagram, yeah.
Okay, I think that was the one where I'm swimming through the terrible ice at the end of it or something after
Through
the wave.
the slush. Yeah, you fell off the wave, and then you're in like a slush.
Yeah.
So how did you first get into ice surfing? Like, I'm assuming you were originally just a normal surfer?
Yeah, I started in the ocean in Australia, actually. I was living there in my van and in Perth for a while in a flat for about a year total, traveling around. And when I bought my van there, it came with this shitty waterlogged surfboard, just like the worst surfboard to learn on possible. But I knew nothing, and I'd snowboarded at a pretty high level out in BC, where we have really big mountains in the west of Canada, for my whole childhood. So I was like, oh, it'll be easy. I'll just pick it up. So for the next 6 months, I just floundered and struggled in these heavy Australian waves, and it was hilarious. But I eventually started catching waves, and I loved it. So then when we moved back to Canada and we ended up moving east to Montreal, that's when I saw there was the river wave. And when people said, like, you can't surf through the winter, I kind of challenged that mentally. I was like, why not? Like, let's see, maybe you can, like, with a good wetsuit and whatnot. And then over the past decade, I basically started figuring out where that line actually is and just started pushing it and trying to find out how cold you can go and how savage of a condition you can actually surf in.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like it's pretty brutal out there, to be honest. So what sort of gear do you have to get? Is it a lot of specialist gear or anything like that?
Not really. It's the same kind of thing you'd wear for cold water surfing in the ocean. It's just way colder, like way colder, because it's fresh water for one. So the water freezes as it's coming down, whereas like ocean water takes a lot colder to freeze. I think it freezes at around -2 Celsius, whereas it's 0 for fresh water. So the only thing really keeping the water when it's like -30, -40 Celsius out, the only thing keeping the river flowing and keeping the water liquid is the fact that it's moving. So if it wasn't moving, like big rapids like that, it would be frozen solid. So it's the same gear, but you have to use it a little differently. Like, you need to keep moving, and you need to, like, some people wear extra stuff, like put Vaseline on, things like that. You wouldn't really do so much in the ocean. But for me, I find I'm fine with like a 5 or 6 millimeter wetsuit, big mitts, big boots, and that's about it.
So how do you line up on like I know nothing about surfing, like normal surfing or obviously ice surfing. So what's the differences with it? What are the big challenges? Other than obviously,
ocean surfing is very different than river surfing. They're almost like a different sport, I would say. So in the river, it's, I'll go over the ocean first because that's what most people are familiar with. In the ocean, you're out at the break, and the swell, the waves have come from across the world from some cyclone. They built up and they got more and more organized, the waves, as they flow through the water. And it's when it hits the beach or a rock or some kind of formation under the water, essentially it gets shallower, and there's all this energy in the wave. And when it gets shallower, it gets compressed, and it forces the energy up, which creates the wave, which breaks. So that's ocean surfing, and it's a lot about timing, and you have to understand the swell, you have to understand the wind, you have to understand all these different elements in order to be in the right place at the right time to jump up and surf that wave. Then in the river, it's a whole other thing because the water's moving, but the wave doesn't actually move. So basically, it's a similar concept. There's a shallow section or a change in flow in the river. Sometimes it's slow water moving into super fast, moving into slow water again. That'll create a standing wave. Or it could just be a rock that forces the water into a certain position. Shallowness, same kind of thing, pushes the wave up. And basically it creates a wave that is not so shallow that you're going to hit the bottom, but is shallow enough that you get that forcing up of the water. And it's interesting though in the river because the water is still moving past you, whereas in the ocean you're kind of moving past the water as you surf. So it's a very different feeling. But it's the same kind of boards we use. There are river waves that are like you have to use really short boards, and it's like foam boards and all this stuff because it's a different style of, it's super shallow and different. But the waves we have here in Canada, we're really lucky. They're really powerful waves, and it's basically the same equipment as ocean surfing. So it's different in how it's formed, and it's different a bit in the way you surf it for sure. But when you're out there, it's still like a wild, natural wave, which is something I really like, as opposed to like some of those man-made, like river waves or whatever.
What with you talking about the waves, obviously in the river. How do you select a good wave?
So the river the waves are always there. They're standing waves, right? So they change every day, and they change with the ups and downs of the level of the water and the speed of the water. But in general, they're in the same spot. So if there's a huge increase of water, for example, it goes up a meter or two, like in the spring floods, that'll completely change the landscape of the river. And at that point, you'll be looking for different waves. But you can always know that, say, at this level of water, this part of the river will have rapids, this part won't. These waves will exist. So in terms of selection, you're just basically like from wave hunting, like when I'm exploring new waves, this is when I really have to think about it because you're out in some river out in the bush 8 hours from civilization, and you know there's no medical help, there's nothing like that. So you really need to be careful when you're selecting waves like that because it's a new thing, right? No one surfed it. Well, maybe someone, but no one you know, otherwise you'd be with them. And you're kind of like, is this wave an actual standing wave that I can surf, or are there rocks? Is there a hole? Is there like a whirlpool? Like you have to be really aware of all these dangers around the wave. Waves like we have here in Montreal, the selection's pretty easy because it's a whole culture. Like you know where the waves are and people are already surfing them, and when they're good, and you just, pick which one you feel you vibe with. Like there's smaller ones that are more aggressive, or there's big wide ones that are more for longboarding or whatever. So you just choose what you're in the mood for, kind of.
So you say you've got a bit of a community out there. How many people are we talking about?
There's definitely thousands of surfers in Montreal proper. So it's a pretty big community for a city. Like Montreal is a big population, like I guess 4 million or something in the surrounds. So it's pretty solid size. But when you consider that it's a landlocked city, there's no ocean, it's like a really large amount of like really good surfers. And a lot of them surf super well in the ocean too, and they travel for that or whatnot, and then surf in the river while they're at home, kind of like I do.
So when you're saying about surfing in the river, are you still as a minority doing like the ice side of it, like going out when you go out and surf?
Absolutely. Like that's when the 1,000 people turns into like 1 or 2.
Right. Okay.
Most people just don't really want to suffer that much, which is fair. I don't blame them. It's like you get a reward. It's fun. It's good to get exercise. It's gorgeous out there. It's beautiful, but there is a certain degree of suffering that comes along with it that you just can't avoid. The wind is on your bare skin, and there's water flushing into your wetsuit that's 0.1 degrees Celsius. Like you have to kind of have some kind of, I don't know, something going on. There was a comment on my video recently. Someone said, "That's not surfing, that's self-hate." And I really laughed at that. I found that funny because it's kind of the opposite for me. I love it, but I can see how someone would think that.
Yeah. It does look like you're putting yourself through the ringer of your own accord. Is there any sort of I don't know whether popular is the right word, but like popular destinations for the ice surfing?
Not really. Like no one really does it in terms of a destination thing. Like the only viral like YouTube videos I've seen where people are, trying to do it, they're more like novelty type stuff where they went out to like way north, like northern, I think it was Alaska, the one I saw, and they were waiting for the icebergs to break, like the big in the summer when the big pieces are breaking off, and these are like skyscrapers falling into the ocean, and when those hit, they actually create big waves. Like some of them are double overhead, and there were icebergs floating, just like when I'm surfing, except it was an ocean wave. So that's amazing. I would love to do that, but you need a whole crew and like years of planning to make something like that happen. So it's not really like a destination, like, going to Hawaii. It's not the same kind of thing.
No,
not as accessible,
So when you what attracted you to it? Like why? Really, I suppose.
That's the main question I get, I think, the most often. Just because I love surfing so much, and I love being outdoors, and I live so close to the wave here in Montreal. Like I can bike there in 15 minutes. In the winter, it's a 15-minute drive. And I was just surfing my first winter, and I had a winter wetsuit already, and I was like, people told me you have to stop at a certain time, and I was kind of like, why? Like I don't really see the reason, because I didn't understand. And then eventually I went out one day and I arrived, and it was like huge ice pieces coming down, like as big as a semi truck, and I was like, well, this seems interesting, but I didn't really realize what I was getting into, so I paddled out anyway, and I surfed and I survived, but it was like way more than I realized at that point. And then over the years, I just kind of refined my gear, refined my techniques, figured out how I could make it like safer and more fun, even when I'm in those conditions. And I don't know, like I'm from the west coast area of Canada. It's the Rocky Mountains. We have like amazing ski resorts everywhere. And out east, there's just not really any mountains by my standards. So I didn't want to snowboard. And I was still like kind of refining my technique and learning to surf. So it was really exciting at that time. And I just wanted to do it year round. So I just went for it.
So at what age did you get into surfing?
I was probably in my 20s, early 20s.
Oh, right. So would that be considered quite late, or is that just because of the move?
I think it's pretty late. Yeah. Like, I mean, more and more people, I think actually the pandemic made a lot of people take up sports later in life, which I think is awesome. Because, I mean, it's definitely a myth that you can't learn things when you're older, But I definitely had a major disadvantage compared to all the little like Aussie groms, like 5 years old or 2 years old, like their parents pushing them on the board. Like guaranteed you're going to have an easier time of it.
Yeah. So I just can't wrap my head around. So if you go out then and you get out that date, do you know before you get there that obviously obviously you wouldn't go if you knew beforehand, but is it sort of eyeballing it when you get there to say like this is doable today? Or
it used to be like that. I used to show up and then park and then go out to you can basically walk along this kind of spit of land to where there's a really nice viewpoint of the waves. And they're like 100 meters from shore, not too far, so you can see everything, what's coming. That was how I used to do it, and I would not even suit up. Like I would just be there scoping it out, and if it looked good, then I'd paddle out. Now that I'm a lot more experienced, I have specific boards for it that can handle hitting the ice, and I have a lot more experience. Now I just suit up at home, and I just drive there, and I surf no matter what, because the worst case, it's such heavy ice that I ride the wave for a few minutes and then I get swept off, and then I'm stuck in that crazy whirlpool like in that video, which it does suck, but it's like it's a good workout anyway. I'd rather do that than go to the gym. So
fair enough. I have to say I'm the other way, to be honest.
I don't blame you. Most people are.
Yeah, I mean, I do an ice bath every morning, but it doesn't seem.
Oh, you do? Nice. Well, like I started doing ice baths to train for winter surfing actually, and I got really into it because I found it just helped a lot with when the water flushes in. Inevitably, it's going to go through your wetsuit, like go down your neck or whatever, and when it does that, it's super uncomfortable and you gasp. And since doing ice baths, I'm just like way more calm in those moments of intensity.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for me with the ice baths, it doesn't half help with like recovery and stuff like that.
Yeah,
big
definitely.
time. And at the time of the morning, I'd do it up before I start work at 4 o'clock. So it's pretty good wake up.
That's a great wake up. It's a good discipline.
Yeah, I like to do it first thing in the morning because then it's, well, in my head, it's probably the hardest thing I'm going to do that day. So I'm like, let's get that done, and then everything else we can manage.
Totally.
So with your ice baths, then, how long do you stay in an ice bath for now?
Not as long as you'd expect. Like, I don't like to push my ice baths because I'm gonna probably go surfing in freezing water the same day. So, I do minimum 2 minutes up to like 6 or something. My wife's way more intense. She does 10 plus. Like, she's just much better at ice baths than I am. But there's no way in hell she'd ever ice surf. So, it's everyone's different.
Yeah, definitely. So, what sort of a situation that you've been in, like a scary situation? I suppose that's relative term, but yeah.
Yeah, I think the scary days are the ones where you go out and it looks fine, but then when you get out to the wave, and by then, I say 100 meters, but realistically you have to paddle out. You have to go upstream first, then you have to cross the currents, then you let the current pull you into the wave, then you surf the wave, and then after you have to fight through these rapids and these cross currents and whirlpools and ice to get back to shore. So it's like half-hour round trip if you have a short wave in the winter, because you often get stuck in that ice. So the scary ones are when it looks fine. And sometimes the ice isn't even there. So sometimes I'm not really prepared for it. I just go out and I'm like, oh, there's no ice. And then in the next, you can surf the wave infinitely, right? So if I'm on the wave for 10 plus minutes, 20 minutes, then suddenly I look upstream and I see like these like buildings, like these looks like floating cars or something coming down the river at me. And I'm like, okay, I need to like prepare for this. But you can't do much, right? You're on a wave that's 40 feet wide. You can't go anywhere outside that 40-foot distance. I could bail off the wave, but I don't really want to. So, and you're just watching this come at you. And then, I mean, that's not too crazy because you just deal with it. Like you see it coming and you wait for it. And it's kind of like getting in an ice bath. You just get in. There's nothing else you can do. Like worrying about it doesn't help. But then if it comes and it's way heavier ice than you expect, that's when it gets intense, because sometimes the ice is more like slush and you can kind of chop through it with your fins. Other times it's like, a meter thick and literally like rock solid ice. And I think the most dangerous part when that comes, and the scariest part, would be if that does sweep you off the wave and there's a bunch. If it's just one, it's no big deal because you can keep an eye on it when you fall off. But if it's all around you and you fall off the wave, now you're floating in the rapids and you're not on your board, and there's like these giant pieces of like thousands of kilos of like concrete. It's ice, it's rock solid, floating around you and bouncing and going under you, and that's the real danger at that point, is if you get crushed between two of them. So that would be the scariest moment. Then after that, you can kind of when you're out of it, like you get into that whirlpool section where it's just like swirling. It's like an island of ice almost. At that point, it's not as sketchy because you're just stuck, which sucks. Like it's a battle to get back, but it's like not as terrifying because it's just, you're just like, I mean, you're cold. Yeah. I guess there's a danger that you could get stuck out there forever and not make it back to shore, but I've never felt in danger of that, I guess because you're working so hard, you're not freezing or anything like that at that point.
So when you're on you say about, obviously it's 40 foot wide, this wave, you're almost playing like a game of dodgeball basically with obviously car size balls, essentially.
Yeah, from some of them are small, but plate to car sized, I'd say.
So have you had any sort of scenarios like that?
Just dodging the ice, you mean? Or?
Yeah, no, as in like where you've come off, or any sort of close call, shall we say?
Yeah, like I mean that happens all the time. I've never been injured, luckily, knock on wood. I think probably because I just the way I approach it, like I go through every single scenario in my mind and every worst case scenario possible, and I really know the difference, like where the line between true danger and, you know, someone else's perceived danger is. And I know my board super well. I know that wave super well. You know, I surf like 250 plus times a year. I know it super well. So I have to, like, if I didn't know the wave to that degree and how I can work with that wave, then I wouldn't go as close to those ice chunks as I do. And I'd probably I have friends who come occasionally, and when they see a big piece coming, they just bail immediately. And that's the safest course of action, because then you're downstream by the time it comes at you, because you're moving the same speed as it once you fall, right? But I guess just because I've been in those scenarios so many times, I can know where that line between perceived danger and actual danger is, and then work with that. So I, like, at least several times a year that happens, where there's big chunks that come down bigger than I expect, and I have to make do with it and find a way to swim out safely. But it's always been fine, and I've never felt like I was actually, you know, gonna die or get injured seriously.
So what's something that you've found sort of within yourself whilst doing this?
I think it's most people would think it's like an intensity and just like hype or something like that, but I think it's a lot more of a mental calmness that I find. Like when you're on that wave and you see, it's bizarre, because I can see like high rises on the right of me, and I can see bridges, and like it's a big city, right? But the river's huge. And yet when I'm in those scenarios, when it's like blizzarding and there's huge ice coming down at me, like I don't see any of that. I'm fully focused. I don't even know if I'm at that point really aware of my body almost. It's like I'm fully almost in a cerebral mind state. It's like a meditation or something, where you're like kind of beyond what's happening around you. And yeah, it's really hard to describe. You're so focused that you are in like a flow state. And I think that it's taught me a lot about kind of trying to access that similar state in other areas of my life. Like as a musician, when you're I'm a musician as well. So when I'm performing, I think that was the first time I really understood that kind of flow state was through music. And then I recognized it again through the focus of surfing. And now I'm kind of like just playing around with that concept of, couldn't all of life be that kind of fun, you know?
Yeah. So what sort of music do you play then?
We play, actually, it's kind of like Montreal has a kind of a connection to UK jazz scene, but it's like, I guess that would be the closest similarity to style wise. But it's a mix of like jazz and hip hop with elements of prog, like progressive elements, like odd time signatures, things like that. So I play guitar, bass, and I rap and sing, and then we're a trio. Yeah.
So how often do you play?
We used to play all the time, like did a lot of tours. Now we're doing a lot of recording. So we play, you know, a couple times a week together, and lots on our own as well. Mostly like right before this, I was just mixing some audio. We're working on a lot of new songs. So over the pandemic, we wrote like 50 songs or more. I don't even know. So we're trying to actually get that recorded. Whereas in the past, we would quickly go on tour, and when you're touring, there's no time to record really. So unless you have like a whole team, but we're kind of independent. So now we're just like focused. We're like, okay, we're not going to play any shows right now because we want to get these songs down. So
yeah. So when did you start playing the guitar then?
In my teens, I think, maybe a bit before. Yeah, as a kid.
I'm all thumbs with that. I tried to play the guitar, or learn, should I say, a few years back, but I didn't last very long. A couple of months, and I was just
hurts
like,
the fingers, hey?
It did. Surprisingly so. But I don't know. I'm not that rhythmic, I don't think. It's just not. I just don't gel with it at all. I love it. Like, I think it's magical when I see people playing stuff, because like I say, I'm all thumbs. And it's something, that I do enjoy a lot. I listen to obviously music all the time, like, you know, most people do. But yeah, for myself, it's a no-go.
Yeah, I mean, that's great for us because then you can come watch us play. You know, if everyone played, no one would go out to shows. So you need everyone to do different things.
Yeah, definitely. So where do you see your ice surfing going from here? Do you hope it, gains traction with you obviously being on social media with it?
Yeah, I mean, it's gained a lot of traction. I have some sponsors now, and I have a lot of connections I didn't have before. And I've always surfed just for fun. And I think a lot of people are so obsessed with creating a business out of everything these days, that kind of, and I used to be that way with a lot of other side projects too. So I'm kind of trying to keep it pure with surfing and just do it for myself, but share what I'm doing. And as of yet, that's been the best results. Like, it's been almost better business wise as a result anyway. And I think that's cool to be able to share, but still be coming from a place of like doing something because you love it instead of, buying into trends and whatever. Like, people always say like you're doing it for views, but like I actually did this for 6-7 years without ever posting anything besides, a text of my ice beard to a friend just to kind of weird them out or whatever. And until my wife was like, you should just like share this because people probably would want to see what you're doing, And I was like, yeah, but it's for me. And then when I did it, people really liked it. So I'm trying to stay true to that original thing. But I'm also really grateful for all the connections I've made and of just like other surfers all over the world, river surfers and ocean surfers, and just opportunities and filmmakers, stuff like that. We have a documentary coming out pretty soon. We're in the very final stages, like 99% done. And that'll be like a film festival documentary about just my winter surfing. So yeah, I'm just kind of going with it and seeing where it goes naturally, not trying to push it too hard.
Yeah. I mean, I tend to agree with that. It's the same with the podcast, and I've always said that I want to do it to talk to people. If it gains if it does well, and gets out to the masses, and everyone loves it, happy days. But in the same thing, if I only have a few hundred views, it is what it is. Totally. I do it because I want to make the connections with people. The amount that I've learned since doing this is off the charts. Really, especially with the sort of obscure sports and all that sort of stuff that I've come across, and it all just fascinates me. Like I don't know obviously I don't know anyone that ice surfs, or I won't be talking to you, but it's just something, it's somewhat of an ordinary sport, not so much in the UK, but like surfing is a well-known sport. But yeah, to have. Yeah, to ice, I'd just never seen it, and I was just like, I need to get this guy on because this is it's a bizarre thing to do, I think, to be honest.
Yeah, I think a lot of people kind of think that I only ice surf, because that's what's so obviously different on my channels. But really, I'm just a surfer, and I happen to live where there's a river, so I river surf while I'm here, and then I also do trips in the ocean, and the ice is just what ends up going viral, so that's what everyone sees, and they think that that's my only thing. But I definitely love it a lot more than most people would think, and that's definitely a part of what I am as a surfer, but it's not my only thing. I just love I love just being outdoors. Even before surfing, it was other sports too.
So what does your day look like then?
My day is kind of ruled by the waves, I would say, kind of like any surfer. So when the wave is good, or when there's a good river wave nearby that's happening, I'm going to prioritize that. That's going to be my number one thing. And getting there while it's good quality. In the ocean, that's often super early mornings or sunsets, depending where you live and what your break's like. So my day would be revolving around that. Here, if I'm doing a trip to surf like up north or something, there's some crazy waves out of the city that are amazing. Then that's going to be my whole day. But I guess an average day with the music I do, and I do some marketing, I have some other self-employed businesses, and then surfing too. I kind of have my like morning routine, and then I would often do some work first and then go surfing. and then come home, probably do some video editing, some music stuff. And then we would often have band practice where we work on some new songs or record some stuff at night, and then repeat. Like I surf most days, so it's a pretty similar schedule like that, with other stuff thrown in, obviously, like trips and going to see, friends and bands and whatever else is going on. And usually there's an ice bath in there as well. Not in the summer because I don't have a cooling one at the moment, but I'd love to. I find it so helpful.
So how long are you out for when you're out on the waves, or I suppose that's dependent?
Yeah, it's all dependent. The really, really cold days, I think my longest I would be out is about 2 hours. Like we're talking -40 or like -35 plus wind chill. So that's like, it's brutal, very cold. And on days like that, it's almost like, if I am staying 2 hours in that condition, it's actually, the wave is surprisingly good, because normally the wave is terrible. There's just so much ice coming down that you almost can't stay on it. So it's, between an hour and 2 hours max on those freezing days. And then the other days, it's like I'm moving, I'm working hard. So I'm not really freezing. So I stay as long as I want, between, 2 or 4 hours, whatever. I think in general, it's around 2 hours.
So you're using that as essentially what people use as their gym time, is your...
Kinda, yeah. I mean, it's a bit tricky because it's a very high impact sport for your body. Like, for sure it builds all around muscle and strength, but it's also, there's a lot of wear and tear that goes along with it. So I try to also do some yoga or Pilates or just really specific surf training and stretching, weights as well, like, yeah, besides actually surfing, because if you only do the one motion, you're guaranteed to have some problems, injuries, or just, limitations down the road. So I try to fit that in, but I'm always like super psyched to surf. So when I get the opportunity, it's tricky to choose to, do squats when I could be swimming and surfing.
Yeah, definitely. I've got the same. Well, at the minute, I'm currently injured. Actually, now you mentioned it. Yeah, I've got an issue with my shoulder, so I'm not jiu-jitsuing at the minute. I'm just trying to sort of rehab it in the gym a little bit and just see how much tension and stuff I can put on it. Today was quite a good session, actually. I'm quite surprised. So hoping next week we'll be back to it.
Yeah, I hope so. That's frustrating, being injured, especially when you want to be doing your sport or even just daily activities. Like, shoulders are brutal. Sometimes just, cooking and chopping vegetables can be painful,
Yeah, luckily it's my left, so I am a righty. So yeah, it's not too bad. So what else do you want to talk about? Because I mean, we spoke obviously beforehand about where you live and the Trudeau.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on him? Because obviously from the podcast that I listen to and all the rest of it like that, it seems like Canada's quite divided.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Canada became more like the States. I hate to say that, but over the pandemic, people became more opinionated than they used to be, I think. And I'm more of the like anti-political side of things. So for me, I'm kind of just like, they're all fucked. And I just try to, make my own life really good without having to buy into the messed up system. So I don't go into it too much. And especially, we always have contrast too. We can always look south and see way worse stuff happening. So it's like, at least we have healthcare and things like that. So I try not to go into it too much. And yeah, it's one of those tricky things where people get super polarized. And I think that really ultimately, if both sides of people want some kind of, maybe it seems like they have opposing views, but if you actually talk to them, they kind of want the same things. And they're always just looking for someone to blame. And I think we could, make a lot more progress if we kind of worked on ourselves and made our own lives good instead of just pointing fingers and not changing anything in your own life.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it seems as though a lot of sort of the Americanism they've got over here as well, to be honest, in the UK.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, obviously with like it's all over the social media, so like the trans stuff and all of that. Like I've got a 14-year-old daughter. She hates me talking about her on the podcast. And there's a group of, I think it's a group of girls. Oh, no. Is it trans? Yeah, but girls to boys, whatever that is. And nothing has changed. Like they're just a group of girls, but they're like, oh no, we think we're men, and the school are just going along with it. And I'm like, but there's, like, I have no issue with it really, and especially not that way. They're no danger to anyone. I would be not that happy if it was the other way and there was a 14-year-old boy that was saying it and trying to get in the girls' changing rooms and all the rest of it. Because it wasn't the same. There's something up in Canada, a 53-year-old man that is saying,
I don't know. I didn't hear that specific case, but
so
it's such a complicated thing. Like, people should be able to do whatever they want, but you also don't want to encroach on someone else's safety. So that's what it comes down to, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Well, this guy in Canada, he is, I'm pretty sure he's in his 50s, definitely 53, I think. And he identifies as a 13-year-old girl, and he swims on the swim team.
Interesting. I had a question for you. Have you ever surfed at all? Like, did you try it on a trip or anything? Or I know in Ireland there's insane surf. I don't know about the UK. I think there's some decent surf too.
Where I'm pretty central I'm almost smack bang in the middle of the UK. I'm pretty sure I have, though. When I was in the military on an adventure training, I'm pretty sure we did. I'm fairly confident I didn't get up on the board.
Well, did you have that rush of the first wave kind of rush at all?
It's not it's again, I'm sort of a football, obviously mixed martial arts, stuff on land, if I'm honest. I'm not even a big fan of up in the air. Like, I've never skydived or anything like that, any of the extreme sports. I've had a windsurfer on. He's one of my earliest podcasts. He's best mates with my little brother when they were growing up. He's like the UK windsurfing champion.
Oh wow, nice.
So but my brother used to go with him and stand and stuff, but I don't even think my brother got into it that much, if I'm honest. It's not a sport that's, I suppose, just because I'm not near it. Do you know what I mean? I'm not around down in Cornwall, stuff like that, and that's where he is now. It's massive down there, like huge. But yeah, not so much here, if I'm honest.
Yeah, I'm always interested to hear from people who have tried it, because it seems like it was either no impression or it's less often like no impression. It's more often either they hated it because it was, salt water in their nose and just so uncomfortable and whatever, or they felt one good wave and they kind of fell in love with it, at least for a time. So it's interesting to hear but then again, like you say, you're not near it, so how can you really develop that core memory if you're never around it?
Yeah, no, I think it was just a day on our adventure training. So, like, in the military, you'd go away for a week and you'd do like a smattering of adventure stuff. So you do like rock climbing and I'm not supposed to say walking's that adventurous, but like canoeing, kayaking, all the different stuff like that. And then it was one day we just went to the beach and that's what we were doing. There wasn't a choice in it. It just, I don't know. It's just not for me, to be honest. It's just not something that's ever.
That's fine. There's too many surfers out there already.
So, what in the surfing community then do river surfers and ocean surfers? Is there like a beef there?
I don't think. Yeah, sort of. It's kind of hard to. It's like there's a beef one way. Like, river surfers have nothing. They love ocean surfing too. That's just usually how it is, pretty much. Ocean surfers often have a bias or a prejudice against river surfers. That they're like, oh, it's not real surfing. It's like, and like they have a point in some ways. Like, some river waves are super lame. Like, and I did a trip across the northern U.S. and then through Canada as well last year. Drive across the country all the time, so we decided to go through the States this time. and I surfed a bunch of river waves on the way to the coast. And like compared to what we have and what I'm used to surfing, a lot of them were like super lame. And I don't want to down on them too much because maybe at certain times of year they're sick. But I was like, okay, now I finally understand why ocean surfers have beef with river surfers, or not even beef. They're just like, they disregard them. They say you're not real surfers or whatever, because the waves were like, you know, knee high, tiny little waves, and you needed a specific board that was really small, and like you couldn't surf an ocean board, and it was so shallow that if you like put too much weight on the front of your board, you just sunk and you'd hit the bottom. And it was just like everything that I love about surfing, which is like, you know, stomping into the water and having the power of the water move you, and just like you couldn't do any of that unless you had the right board and a lot of expertise working with that specific style of wave. So I was like very underwhelmed, and I learned I understood why they think that. But then I guarantee you take any of those people that are like all anti-river surfers and you take them to like some of the big waves, the heavy river waves that I surf, I guarantee you they will be terrified, you know, like they're heavy, dangerous waves. So it's all relative. People they think that they like to do blanket statements, you know, they think this is what it is, but that's not really the case. You know, there's different waves everywhere. So I'm sure there's some ocean waves that are, you know, not super amazing either, you know. So
Oh yeah, no doubt. So obviously with your hair, what do you do with it in the wetsuit?
that's a funny, actually. I just cut it recently because it was super long. It was like nearing my waist, and I was surfing in Halifax on the east coast of Canada, and there was a double overhead, triple overhead swell. So it was like 18 to 20 feet was the forecast. So like solid waves. And I think it was about 18 once I actually got past the break, which took a while and the swell was dying down. But I was popping up, and it's pretty critical when you're surfing a bigger wave like that. There's definitely a big difference when you start surfing double overhead, triple overhead waves. It's another level. Like even if it's a mushy wave, if you fall in the wrong spot,
what does that mean?
It can become dangerous.
Wave? What's a mushy wave?
A mushy wave, like for example, if the wave breaks, like there's foam on top, but it's breaking like really wide like this. Whereas like a really heavy wave is going to be like it's really steep and like critical, like you're dropping in vertical almost. Whereas like a mushy one is going to like pop you in, and you're dropping in more on like a ramp instead of like a, you know, drop off. So even if they're like not that steep, if you fall, there's so much power and speed in a wave that big. Like you can be held down for a solid amount of time, and that's, no one wants to be holding their breath and getting thrashed underwater and hitting the bottom, and it's just not fun. So I popped up, and you have about a split second where you have to do everything right when you're jumping up on an ocean wave. You have to jump up to your feet and go the right direction, all within like a split second. If you do anything wrong, you'll either get thrown by the wave or you won't catch it. So it's pretty critical. And when I popped up, my hair somehow got under my hand. And so I started popping up, and my head got like yanked down onto the board, just like slammed down. And luckily it yanked me down kind of left, and I was taking a wave going left. So it turned me off the wave, and I didn't get thrown over the falls. They say over the falls because it feels like you're falling off a waterfall when that happens. And so I was fine, but immediately after that happened, I was like, I'm cutting this because it's such a pain. It's like, you know, once it becomes actually dangerous on waves like that, then that's not cool. So I think I stuffed it somehow really awkwardly for the rest of that session and continued surfing. And then when I got back home, I cut a bunch off. And then, yeah, in the winter also, it was really annoying because it sticks out of the wetsuit and gets super iced up and heavy, covered in ice. And now with this length, I can deal with it. I can kind of put it in the suit or pull some out the front. Sometimes I split it like half through the neck and half out stuffed into the back, and then I deal with it. I mean, I know a friend who surfs in the Great Lakes, and those surfers are freaking hardcore because it's the only time you get waves is when it's windy, and the best storms are in the winter. So we're talking like minus 40 plus insane winds, 70 kilometers an hour plus or whatever. So it's just terrible surfing like so cold. And this guy has hair like locks like past his waist, and they're fat, like super thick. And he said it probably weighs like 20 pounds. Like he puts them out a hole in the top of his head and lets them drag. Like when I don't know how he does it, to be honest. Like I would never do that. It's just my neck would break, I think.
So what sort of size wave would you be comfortable on, or what's the biggest wave you've ever been on?
I think my biggest waves are around the 20-foot range. Like I don't really have a big wave board, so I'm riding this mid-length, which is like a great all-round board for like small waves, but it can handle bigger waves as well. But it doesn't like hold on really well. Like surfers have a different board for every condition, so that's problematic when you have a small shed and live in a little apartment in Montreal. But I built something in our backyard for storage, so I have a decent quiver, like 7 or 8 boards or 9 boards, one for every kind of condition. But I don't have a big wave board because I just don't surf them that often, and it's also just at a certain size, I'm kind of like, I don't know if I have the expertise for this. I'd have to be like living somewhere or traveling somewhere with big waves often to work myself up to surfing 20 plus foot waves all the time to justify having a board, that's like that. And then like, it's not just size of wave, because like a really heavy 6 or 7 foot wave that's like really curling barrel could be more dangerous than a 15-foot wave that's just like a really nice calm beach break where there's no rocks or reef or anything underneath you. So it's every wave's different. Like it's kind of like a cliche saying that waves of life or whatever, but it's like literally every wave you surf in the ocean feels like a new wave.
So when you're saying about, obviously you've got 7 boards out, so what does each one do?
So I have 2 soft tops. I mentioned the gear earlier, like how you need different gear in the winter. Because I'm constantly hitting ice, but boards are basically foam that are covered in epoxy resin and fiberglass. So it's like a really hard exterior and then just really breakable foam, like think styrofoam. If you flick it, you could just break it, right? So it's better quality than that, but it's still really not strong. So I can't surf that in the winter because hitting those ice chunks is like, taking a hammer to your surfboard, like you destroy it. So the first few years I did it, I would go out and have like, 20 repairs to do after one session. And it was just brutal. Like I learned to repair boards that way, but I'd rather not have to do that. So soft tops are like kind of they're mostly for beginners, but now there's more performance soft tops that are coming out on the market, and those actually surf quite well, decently well. And when you hit the ice with those, at least it kind of bounces off and it won't destroy the board. Like you can still surf it. So I have 2 of those for winter, one that's like for small waves and one that's more performance. And then all the other boards are like performance boards, longboard, a mid-length. Longboard is for small waves and it's like technical surfing, walking on the board. Mid-length is like all around. Like I said, I can surf it in pretty big double overhead waves, but I can also use it in small waves. And then I have a bunch of short boards for different conditions that are just like different shapes. Basically, it's like, riding a skateboard versus a longboard versus a surf skate. Like they all have different things that they do. They feel different and work differently with the waves. So, and then the floatiness and lengths, that all affects how they surf. So when you go out to this spot and you check the waves, you can guess like, what do I want to surf today that will work best. I like to surf different boards. Some people are like, I'm a specialist and I surf, a 6-foot performance shortboard thruster, which means 3 fins, and that's my thing, and I rip it. And if it's like really crappy small waves, I'll still surf that. But for me, I'm like, nah, I'd rather like have a bunch of different boards and learn to surf them all to have different feelings and just, yeah, I just find it more fun.
Yeah, definitely, to have a a piece of each one. What you got there?
Nice coffee, espresso.
Nice. What time is it in Canada now?
It's 3:00 on the East Coast here.
So you're 5 hours behind. So you're I've lost my trail of thought now. This never happens. It's because it's been a super long day. If you could have started surfing earlier, I take it you would have. Is it something that you're gutted that you missed out on?
I'm not gutted that I missed out on it per se, because I was having so much fun in the mountains doing mountain sports. And no, I don't think, like, I would have if I was around it. Definitely. Like, that's a no brainer. I've always been into like adventure sports and especially outdoor sports. That's a big part of the BC culture in the west of Canada. So I would have done it, but I don't feel like I missed out because I was doing so many other things. I was rock climbing and mountain biking and snowboarding and, enjoying the mountains. And if I had only been surfing, right now I'd probably look at all those other sports and be like, oh, I wish I'd had time to do those, So it's like a trade-off, and I'm glad I've experienced all of it to some degree.
Do you do any of them sports now, or is it solely ice surfing or surfing?
Yeah, I do. I'll definitely rock climb occasionally. You need a lot of gear though, so it would be with friends who have updated gear, because like my ropes are out of date, so I can't do like longer routes with them or whatever. Certain things you have to retire in rock climbing because it becomes unsafe. So I don't have all the gear anymore, but I still go when I have the opportunity, and definitely like small like scrambling, like mountain climbing whenever I get the chance. And snowboarding less, because I've had some pretty big injuries snowboarding, and my knee, it gets irritated when I step into the bindings. But yeah, if I was out west, I probably would. For some reason, surfing doesn't bother me. I think it's because you're constantly moving on the board. It's more of a flowy kind of motion where you have more flexibility with how you move while you surf.
Does a lot of snowboarding transfer to surfing?
A lot of people would think so, myself included, but I would say emphatically no. Like, yes, balance for sure, it helps. Same with skateboarding. Skateboarding would transfer more than snowboarding. Any kind of board sport where you're balancing will help, but surfing is just the hardest sport I've ever done by far. Like, every other sport I've tried doesn't even compare, just because you're not only talking about the technique of surfing a wave, but you're also talking about the ocean giving you a wave and you having to think, okay, where do I need to be? When do I need to jump up? And all the other techniques related to being in the right place at the right time. So it's almost like you need to study before you can even surf it, whereas a snowboarder, it's like the snow is there. It's not changing. Whereas like you need to pick your wave when you're surfing. The first wave of a set might be really good and the rest of the set might be bad, and you need to kind of think, which one do I want to go for, etc. So it's it's pretty hard. It's a very complicated sport in that way.
So when you're surfing, ocean surfing, how do you, like, obviously you go out to a certain how do you choose the distance that you swim out to?
Basically, you want to be at the spot where the wave is just breaking. So you can look, like, if I'm ever surfing a new spot in the ocean, I'll stand on shore for a good half hour sometimes and just observe it, because sometimes sets are like a group of waves that comes in that are all nice sometimes, and then there might be a break in between. So sometimes the good sets will only come every half hour. So if you just paddle out and just go for it, you might think that the good spot is here, but the actual set waves, the good ones, come later on and they're in a totally different place. And once you're in the water, you have no point of reference and you'll just be lost. So I learned that the hard way traveling around Australia. When I would get back in and my girlfriend was like, yo, you were like in the worst spot. Everyone else was scoring over there and you were just like sucked off in the distance. So she has a lot of photos of me just like sitting there and everyone else scoring barrels and just ripping. So I learned that definitely the hard way. And so you want to be where the waves break, and that's different in every spot. It's every single place you surf will be different, and also the even if you're in the same place, the conditions will affect it. You know, the rip tide will change potentially with different winds, or different, you know, swell directions. So yeah, it's a lot of study.
When you're
But basically what it comes down to is that all the energy of the wave comes to a point, and you want to be there at that point right there, so that you have to do as little energy as possible to get on it. If you catch it too late, you have to paddle really hard on the shoulder, depending on the wave. If you catch it too early, you have to paddle even harder, and you probably will just miss it. So you want that pitching forward of the wave to just pitch you into the wave, and then you're standing on your feet and you're good. And the river's kind of the same. Like, you're pulling yourself down into the wave, and you want to just paddle really hard so that the foam in the steepest, like most powerful part of the wave, where there's a bit of foam, that hits you, and then you're up on your feet and surfing.
Do you have any issues with wildlife at all?
I've never seen sharks or anything scary in the water. I've seen, well, I guess sea lions when they can be aggressive sometimes, but you just kind of stay out of their way. But not issues. I kind of love seeing wildlife when I'm out there. I swam out to a whale last summer, a giant gray whale, like a 75-foot gray whale. And
wow.
when you go out to big whales like that, you kind of let them come to you. So I just paddled out. The waves were like 6 inches, like 1 foot, tiny, not even worth surfing. But I had my gear, so I just saw the whale out there. I was like, I'm going to go and see if it comes over. And it actually like came over, circled me, like came right up close, and then dove under me and left. And it was epic. So crazy being in the water with something that gigantic.
Yeah. How did it make you feel?
Kind of like way more terrified than I expected, to be honest. Like, I thought I would be super chill. Like, I love wildlife, and I'm always out in nature. But when that thing started coming at me, like, this is my first time with a huge whale, like watching it move forward towards me like a freight train, like the same size as a train car.
Yeah.
It was like, holy shit, like just sitting really still, like, and I know it can see me. I knew it wouldn't hurt me because whales are really calm, gentle creatures, and I knew it already saw me. So the main danger when swimming with whales is like if they don't see you and they like hit you with their fin or something. So it was like definitely nerve wracking. It was like, holy shit. But then after, it was like, damn, that was an insane experience. I would definitely go swim with whales again.
Would you say that's up there with your craziest experience surfing?
Yeah, I mean, it's up there. I wouldn't call it a surfing experience because the waves were so bad. I wouldn't have even surfed. I caught like one wave after on my way in, and it was like, you know, knee deep water, and the wave was like this tall. But yeah, it was more about the nature experience than the surfing experience in that case.
So what would you say is then? What is your standout surfing experience?
In terms of ocean, I got some amazing waves like this summer in Oregon last summer, and it was just a really nice, like, misty day where it's funny how these waves kind of get seared into your memory. It would have been my first wave this day, and I paddled out, and I knew the waves were double overhead. So like I think the forecast was like 12 to 18 feet, something like that. So I knew it was pretty big, but it was so misty that you could only see like max 5-10 meters ahead of you. It was like super socked in mist. So I was walking out hearing these roaring waves and didn't know if anyone was out there, didn't know where the waves were really, besides having surfed there the day before. And when I paddled out, I followed the cliff out, and it was just so nice because there was a cliff with a really nice riptide that pulled you out without a struggle. So I was able to get out easily, which always makes the experience a little nicer. And then I remember just paddling once I got out deep enough and just hearing this like thunder roaring, but not seeing anything. And then slowly seeing a little bit more and kind of working my way closer slowly because I didn't want to get in the wrong place. Like I didn't want to get hit by a wave if I was too shallow. And I eventually got just alongside it and saw my first wave and was like, holy, like it's like double what I expected. Like beautiful, huge wave just coming down through the mist. And then when I caught my first wave, it was insanely trippy because you're in mist all around 360 degrees. So you're dropping in on this wave that's like, it was probably 15 feet, maybe 13 or 14 feet. and dropping in, and at the bottom of the wave, like it's mist, like I can't see anything. So I was just in this bubble of this wave, and I knew I was surfing towards the cliff, which was extra trippy because I was like, I need to make sure I get off the wave before I hit the cliff too. So I was like just in this bubble, and then when I popped off the wave at the right moment, I kind of saw where I could paddle out again, and it was just surreal, amazing.
How many people would be out there on a day like that?
That was at dawn that I went, so not that many. Most people don't want to get up early. I think there were about 5 of us, maybe only 2 to start, and then like a few more people started coming out. But it depends where you are. Like in California on a big day, like there's just so many, and it gets aggressive in the lineup sometimes. It can be stressful. So it's always more fun when it's just a few people that are chill and you're just sharing waves instead of kind of fighting for them, you know?
When you first started ice surfing, what was something that surprised you about it, or something that you potentially overlooked?
I think the ice surprised me. Like I expected the cold, but I didn't expect the magnitude of the ice coming down. And that would be another standout surfing experience. Would be like, I mean, there's so many, but like the entire landscape changes of the ice in minutes because it's the currents moving things around, right? So I think the first time that I rode an ice chunk, like a huge one, and rode it into the wave would be a standout memory because you're just like on this thing, you're literally standing on the thing that you're trying to avoid, you know, and then dropping into the wave from it and then surfing it. And then afterwards you can just stand in that island of ice chunks and just look around, and it's like a whole other world. It feels like you're in Antarctica or the Arctic or something. Yeah,
I bet it does seem otherworldly. Have you got any advice that you would give to anyone that's looking to get into ice surfing? Or surfing in general, I suppose.
Get a hold of me and I'll show you, because like there's not many people. I'm always down to take people out if they want, but I won't take you out unless you really know what you're doing. Because like basically don't underestimate it, because I say it's chill and it's fine and anyone can do it. Like I really believe that anyone can do this, but I also realize that it's not as easy as I feel like it is. And you could easily get seriously injured, and it is dangerous. And it's just the years of experience and the way that I built up the tolerance to it and built up my equipment and everything that makes it feel safer to me. So yeah, I just go slow and talk to locals and find someone who's been doing it for years, who isn't too reckless, who will, you know, show you the way. Kind of like learning anything. You know, you want to find a master who knows what they're doing, and you want to take it slow. You don't just start base jumping, you know, you do skydiving first, like, you know, tandem. You don't do it alone. So that kind of thing, one step at a time.
Yeah, so would you recommend to go like to do more sort of ocean surfing, or, you know, river surfing in the, you know, more tame months?
Yeah,
like learn to surf, first.
Start with fishing, because that's chill. You're in the water, and then once you're used to the water, then you can find some small waves. And the ocean's a bit more friendly for sure for learning, because you don't feel like you're going to get sucked down to the, you know, from the river all the way to the ocean or whatever. Yeah. It can make you panic as a new person. But I mean, the rivers can be safe too. You just have to find the right one. That's the key. So you always have to just talk to people and find out what's a good place to learn.
Well, it's been brilliant having you on today, Orion.
Thanks for having me, Jack.
No, it's been an absolute pleasure, and I've definitely learnt something new. Well, quite a lot new, actually, to be honest. I didn't know anything about any type of surfing, really. Do you want to give everyone your socials and whatnot?
Yeah, my socials, it's Orion Surfs. Orion like the constellation, so Orion Surfs, plural. And I'm on YouTube and Instagram and TikTok. And yeah, after this, I'm going to go surfing without a wetsuit, because we have a spring snowstorm here in Montreal. It's not too cold. So I want to challenge myself and see how long I can stay out without any equipment in the snow. Should be fun.
Well, good luck with that.
Thanks.
I won't be joining you anytime soon, I wouldn't have thought, on that. And thank you for coming on.
Cheers. Thanks for having me.
See you later, everybody.